Welcome back, everyone. In this video, I'm going to be talking with you about segmentation and targeting. This is the 6th video in the course International Marketing Management. At this stage of the course, we've been working through our onion model. We've peeled away the layers of market, organization, and strategy. And now we're beginning the section on STP, which stands for segmentation, targeting, and positioning. We'll talk about segmentation and targeting together, and then in video 7, we'll talk about positioning. In this lecture, our objectives are to explain the rationale for segmentation, and you'll learn the procedures for segmenting and the procedures for targeting. For the activities, I want you to, of course, watch this video. You'll also watch the TED Talk with Malcolm Gladwell. You should read 2 readings. These are both posted as PDFs in the Facebook group and on the Ishik campus. The first reading is called International Market Segmentation, Issues and Perspectives. And the second reading is an overview of consumer behavior in the buying process. Once you've finished watching the videos and reading the readings, please join me on Facebook to participate in discussions. What is segmentation? Well, segmentation is the process of segmenting or grouping. What we want to do is to be able to make meaningful groupings of the buying units, the target audience, or so that we can identify the target audience. When we talk about the prospective units, it could be households, it could be organizations if we're in a B2B marketing situation, or it could be individuals. Oftentimes when I'm talking about segmentation, I'll use the term individuals, but just keep in mind that it could be any type of unit that we are considering selling to. And why do we segment? Well, we segment because segmentation is a strategic trade-off between the efficiency of treating everyone the same and the effectiveness of treating everyone differently. Now let's think about that a little bit. If we offered only one offer in the market, we would be very efficient in creating and delivering that market, but we would only make the customers happy who wanted exactly what we brought to market. On the other hand, if we made a custom offer for every single possible prospect, exactly what they wanted, we would have great satisfaction with them. We would be very effective in meeting those customers' needs, but we would be very inefficient. So when we segment, we are trading off between the efficiency of treating everyone the same and the effectiveness of treating everyone differently. In essence, what we do is to put all of the people who are alike into the same group or segment, and then we design an offer for them. That way, we can still achieve our effectiveness goals, even though we only have the same number of offers as we have the number of target segments. So we know that it's a good idea to take our total available market, as we talked about on Thursday, and to group or segment that total available market into meaningful groups so that we can better design an offer that's relevant for those groups. But how do we go about grouping people or buying units together? Well, there are 5 categories of variables that marketers typically use in order to form the basis of their segmentation approaches. These 5 segmentation bases are categorical variables, or oftentimes called demographic variables, psychographic variables, geographic variables, behavioral variables, and benefits sought. Categorical variables or demographic variables are any sort of factual categorical variable that describes the characteristics about the buying unit. For instance, common demographic variables that marketers might use include income, age, gender, size of household, family life cycle, educational status, occupational status, race and ethnicity. There are many of these types of variables. What's important to remember, though, is that marketers use these variables because this data is fairly accessible and inexpensive to acquire. The data in and of itself doesn't really explain to us why people want what they want, but they allow us to make good guesses about what they might want. The second category is psychographic variables. Sometimes this category is referred to as lifestyle variables or as AIO variables. AIO stands for attitudes, interests, and opinions. Again, attitudes, interests, and opinions. So anything that describes the psychological background of customer groups would go into the psychographic category. Knowing things about people's hobbies, how they feel about politics or religion or interests like environmental sustainability and so on, all of these things could be part of the psychographic segmentation base. And again, this category doesn't necessarily help us understand the wants and needs of the customer group, but it does help us to understand their buying behavior overall, and to understand how best to reach them with a communication strategy. For instance, it might let us know what magazines to advertise in or what websites they might be prone to visit. It can also help us making decisions for advertising, like what type of people to show in our ads. The third segmentation base is geographic, and this could include information about the nature of the weather in a certain geographic area. It might refer to whether someone lives in an urban area or a rural area and what that means for the channel of distribution. Anything that has a geographic context to it would fall into this base. The fourth segmentation base is behavioral. This means that we can group people based on their behaviors, and those behaviors might be relevant to the product category that we are marketing, or it might be other types of behaviors completely. For instance, it might be behaviors about how they shop or when they shop or whether they use a credit card, whether they shop online. So any type of behavioral information would go here. And then lastly, we have the segmentation base of benefits sought. Benefits sought is the most important segmentation base because that means that we actually know what benefits the prospective customers might want to have, and that would be the most valuable information for us both as we design our offer and as we group customers. However, this information is typically difficult to access or very expensive to access, and so most of the time marketers don't have access to benefits sought, and so we use the other four segmentation bases as a type of proxy for this last basis of segmentation. This slide shows some of the same information that we just talked about on the last slide, but it explains that these segmentation variables that you might choose as the variables upon which to base your groupings of prospective customers, how they can be divided into concrete or abstract variables and general or product-specific variables. Concrete general variables are primarily those demographic variables that we talked about on the last slide. Abstract general variables are psychological variables. They are things like the activities and attitudes and opinions, the beliefs and the knowledge that the prospects might have. Concrete product-specific variables give us information like people's shopping behaviors or how they might use that type of product or in what types of situations they might use that product, even how they might pay for the product. And then abstract product-specific variables include attitudes related to that product category. Now, really, a marketer could use any variable at all as a basis of segmentation as long as the variable is relevant to that situation and as long as they have access to the data about that particular variable. If those two criteria are met, it could really be any variable whatsoever. So what's important for marketers to do is to try to identify which variables are relevant, which ones actually help us to discriminate and that's a very important word here, discriminate based on that information so that we can group people in meaningful ways. So that first step in the segmentation procedure is to identify what variables you will use in order to segment or group all of the prospects in the total available market into meaningful groups. That then allows you to begin to identify what your total addressable market is going to be. So you can see here how the layers of our onion work together. We were first talking about the total available and total addressable markets back in our first layer of the onion framework that we're going through. And now you can see that it's relevant again here as we're talking about segmentation. Once you know what those variables are, you would be able to use a statistical program known as cluster analysis to cluster all of the people who are similar on the variables that you choose to use in this analysis. The cluster analysis would then identify the number of groups or segments that exist based on those variables. As the program identifies these clusters or groups, anyone inside a cluster would be similar within or homogeneous within, but they would be heterogeneous group to group. In other words, all of the people in group A would be alike, and all of the people in group B would be alike, but group A would be different from group B, and so on. This is the goal that we have of segmentation. When you run a segmentation analysis like this, it allows you to begin to develop a market structure. And on the slide here, I'm showing you a sample market structure from the cosmetics industry. And you can see the segmentation variables that have been used in this segmentation analysis and which form the basis of the market structure. So under cosmetics in general, we first made a segmentation based on gender. So we've divided females from males because we believe that the way males and females use cosmetics and beauty products would be different. Next, we've divided within that gender split based on the needs that someone might have for those beauty products. Notice that women have 5 need states while men only have 3 need states. And so this is why it was relevant for us to first divide based on gender. After that, we've made a division based on the quality being sought and the price point of that product. From there, you can see that just using this simple segmentation procedure with 4 variables helps us to begin to identify the specific nature of the offer that we will bring to market. It allows us to tell how we're going to distribute the product, and what types of outlets we're going to use, and what types of pricing that we would use. Depending upon the segmentation variables that we choose and the diversity of the total available market, the ultimate cluster analysis could be very detailed and complex. That can be the case even in products that are in the introduction stage of the product life cycle. On this slide, I have provided you a graphic of the segmentation structure for the market for wearable products known as wearables, things like the Apple Watch or Google Glass or Fitbit fitness trackers. And while most of the conversations have been about wearables that focus on health and fitness, you can see from this graphic that if we actually ran a full segmentation analysis of the market for wearables, it's really a pretty complex market. Here they have used the variables of gender, usage, hobbies and interests, attitudes, and even vertical industry to be able to identify the segments that exist for the wearable industry. Once we've used the segmentation procedure to produce all of the possible clusters or segments that could be grouped from our total available market, the next step is to identify which of those segments we want to target. It may be that you target only one segment, or you may target several segments. But what is likely is that you will not target every single segment that was identified in the segmentation procedure. This is because targeting should be a strategic choice, and much as we evaluated the attractiveness of market opportunities when we were looking at the opportunity matrix, you also want to assess the attractiveness of the segments that were produced by the segmentation analysis. And only those segments that are truly attractive and for which your organization has a strategic fit would you choose to target. So to evaluate the segments and determine whether the segment is one that you should target, you will use the targeting procedure. There are two key steps. The first step is to evaluate how attractive each segment is. You will evaluate segment attractiveness based on 5 characteristics. They are: is the segment substantial? Is the segment accessible? Is the segment unique? Is the segment durable? And is the segment identifiable? You would only consider targeting segments that meet all 5 of these criteria. So the first criteria of substantial means, is the segment large enough to be worth pursuing? The second characteristic is it accessible? In other words, does your company distribute products to the area where that segment exists? If you aren't currently distributing in that particular geographic area, for instance, then the segment is not actually accessible to you, and you should not consider pursuing it. The third question is the segment unique? This goes to ensuring that when we created our segments or clusters, that they were heterogeneous between. If segments can be combined and treated similarly, then they should be. Only if they are truly unique should we continue to treat them as an individual segment. The fourth characteristic is durable. This asks the question, is the segment likely to last? Will it continue to be an existing relevant segment in some time period from now? This is because if we choose to target this particular segment, it could take us some time to develop our product, to set up manufacturing, to create a marketing communications plan, and to execute on that plan. And we want to be sure that we are targeting segments that continue to exist by the time that we are ready to deploy in the marketplace. Finally, we need to be able to identify what people or units belong in which segment. Otherwise, we could end up making the wrong offer to the wrong person. So we need to be able to clearly classify the prospects into the specific segments. For whatever segments are chosen as attractive based on step 1, we would then perform step 2. Step 2 is to assess whether the segment and the company are compatible. This really goes back to the section on the organization that we covered, where we asked what are our core competencies and what strategic fit do our core competencies enable as we seek to meet the needs of a particular market. So now that we've assessed that segment and we know that it's attractive, and we should already know our core competencies, where do we have a strategic fit? Where do we have the strategic assets that would allow us to successfully meet the needs of that particular segment? We only want to choose to target segments that are both attractive and with which we have this compatibility. Once you've identified which segments you want to target, you would create a prototype or a persona for each of those target segments. And on the slide now, I have an example of what that persona or prototype might look like. Basically, it means that you are telling a story about the stereotype of that particular segment. The idea is to help you feel like you know someone who is in that particular target segment. When you get to the point of making market offer decisions, feeling like you know that segment on a personal basis will make those decisions much easier for you. This is a very common industry technique where companies frequently have a persona for every major target segment they pursue. So in this lecture, you learned about the segmentation procedure, and importantly, you learned about why we segment in order to have that trade-off between efficiency and effectiveness. You also learned the procedure for identifying which segments should be targeted, or what we call the targeting procedure. And you learned about target personas. When we discuss online, we'll be practicing identifying segmentation variables and assessing target attractiveness, and even telling the stories of a target persona. Your next video will be about positioning.